I've now played over 200 hours of Bellwright with friends and on my own, and I want to talk to you about what that experience is like if you're thinking about buying it or playing it for some amount of time. This is a medieval survival game which has a lot of fun elements to it and some frustrating parts as well, as you'd expect. The highlights are definitely the ability to recruit local villagers into your own village and then use them to form a medieval army which you can take out with you and fight the enemy brigands and bandits around the world, get more renown and trust in different villages, then keep buying more and more villages, upgrade your army even more, and just expand your little medieval empire. That's a really nice touch, although micromanaging the people does become quite a chore. Being able to play co-op with your friends is also a big highlight to it. A low light though is that the combat is really tough. When you aggravate the enemies in the world, they immediately just start charging at you. And what I found is essentially right at the beginning and still right near the end, basically end up having to be cheeky and to jump on rocks that the enemy can't jump on so you can fight them and survive. If not, even with really high level armor, as I've shown in the tips and tricks videos, if you want to go check those out, you just end up getting destroyed a lot of the time. So you end up standing on top of a rock and shooting them in the face with arrows until they're dead, which obviously doesn't feel like a great combat system. You just cannot sneak up on enemies, you can't separate them out. If you aggravate one, the whole lot is then coming for you. They'll surround you and they will destroy you. And that's kind of frustrating in the combat arena, even when you've upgraded your abilities later on. Well, that's mostly because you're not really meant to be playing on your own. The idea is not to go out into the world and fight enemies on your own. You're mostly meant to either be playing co-op or using the bots in order to help you do it. So you need to recruit an army, take them with you, and then go and kill baddies. Problem is that the people you recruit and set as a companion cannot fast travel with you. So that means that if you have to go to a certain area to defend it or to attack an enemy stronghold, you have to take the people with you across the entire map, walking very slowly from location to location. What you'll find then is that those villagers will get hungry along the way, and if they get too hungry, as in they haven't got any food in their inventory, they'll just abandon you and wander off in search of food, which means a lot of micromanaging in terms of making sure they have enough food. Now, you can set them to harvest berries and mushrooms, for example, while you're out to keep them fed, and that's one solution to that problem. But it does mean it's a bit of a hassle getting people to come with you. And often you'll find they just get killed anyway in the middle of the battle, which isn't a problem because they do respawn the next day. So it's not a mega issue as long as you don't keep getting them killed, because then they eventually will die completely. But it does show you that really you're meant to play it like this, with lots of companions to help you rather than going solo and trying to take on everybody on your own. But the combat system is a bit frustrating. Even when you've got really high level gear, you still feel like you're not really overpowered when fighting enemies. There are some other frustrating things about the game as well. So to use high level melee weapons like high level swords, axes and things like that, you need high level strength. In order to get high level strength, you have to get in hand-to-hand combat with enemies, and using a bow doesn't count. Attacking wolves and other woodland creatures doesn't count. It has to be your weapon hitting an enemy. And considering the fact that they basically all surround you and then will just kill you, it becomes a real annoyance. We found that you could chop at corpses, so if you shot someone in the face with arrows enough, eventually they die. And if you keep chopping them or boshing them with your weapon, then that counts towards your strength attribute, which then means you can unlock the better weapons and you do more damage. But obviously it feels a bit cheesy and cheeky to do it this way, like you're cheating the game a bit. But honestly, you will just die over and over and over again, at least in my experience, if you're playing in a sort of traditional hand-to-hand combat way on your own or with a couple of friends. So that's kind of frustrating and a bit of an annoying system. Also, stamina is linked to food and doesn't improve no matter how good your attributes get, which is also pretty annoying. The village building mechanics are pretty interesting. However, I would recommend making sure you find a nice big flat piece of land before you craft your village. You can build loads of different buildings and they come in different tiers as you work your way through the tech tree. So there's 1, 2 and 3. But unfortunately, when you get to level 3 buildings, they're huge and they take up a lot of space, and that's not really obvious when you're right at the beginning. So if you don't pick a good spot, you have to basically move your base, which is a massive pain to do. Also, you can't upgrade buildings, you have to build new versions of them, so that means you have to destroy the original ones and you only get some of the parts back. There are some really clever aspects to it though. For example, in these barns, You can see this is the storage units. You can actually tell the barn what to store and what not to store. When it comes to people management, you can manage lots of different things about your villagers in terms of what jobs they're doing. So you can set them specific tasks in the village, and each of the villagers will have different attributes and skills, whether that's in combat or in crafting and other things like that. In terms of building mechanics, Bellwright's pretty frustrating if you want to do the building yourself. It's not really designed for that. Really, you want to get the villagers to do it for you. They're more efficient at it. And frankly, it's just so boring and awkward at the time of making this video to do the building yourself. It's not worth doing. I tried using macros in order to do it, but as you can see, you have to hit a little white dot in the building as you're going through to try and build this thing. And as you hit them, more and more of these appear, and it just takes forever to do. So you're better off equipping a bot with a construction hammer and then setting them to work doing those things. But once you learn how good bots are, you can take advantage of the outpost system. So you can create outposts at specific areas and then get bots to live there in an outpost area, feed them, and then set them up to harvest certain resources. So for example, I've got one here where it's set to harvest granite, iron ore, and tin all in one location. And then you can set automatic deliveries to send those things back to the base, and also food to the outposts so that the villagers are always fed. And you can do some pretty clever things with it. The game doesn't really hold your hand in this regard though, so there's no tutorial. It took a lot of time to discover these things, or obviously watching YouTube videos if you want some tips. But once you work that out, you can really optimize how the resources are gathered. It means you don't have to do the manual gathering of resources anywhere near as much. Once you've recruited a good amount of villagers, you've set up some decent outposts, and you've established how to do it. Because just like building, doing the manual gathering of resources yourself is a pain, and it takes ages, and macros are useful for this. You have to do this a little bit in the early game, but once you get the hang of creating outposts or setting villagers to do specific tasks, then you can just do that. In order to recruit villagers to your village, you first need to do quests for the local village to improve your trust with them. And then when you get a high enough level trust, you can fight the brigands in that village, build a Bellwright tower, which is sort of suggesting that you're defending that area, and liberate the people of the village, and then you can recruit more people to that area. Building the Bellwright tower and other village buildings is a pain, as you can see, because again it requires lots of dots, and also you then have to fight brigand reclamation parties, which is basically bands of bandits that come to take the village back and reclaim control of it. It's quite fun in that regard. There's a lot of interesting highlights to the way that works, but also there's a lot of managing it because you have to get your army there in time to be able to defend the village. Otherwise your tower gets knocked down and you have to start again, and then if you want to recruit more villagers, you have to obviously go through the process of building this again. Otherwise you can only recruit low-level villagers which aren't that good. You want to work on improving the villagers, increasing their attributes, because actually to unlock the best armor in the game, for example, you need villagers to do it for you, and you need to have the highest crafting ability possible for those villagers, which isn't easy. You can get them to do jobs, and you can get them to read books to improve their attributes. So you need to do a mix of those things in order to get it to work. Here you can see my second village, which we actually had to create because the buildings were too big in the first one and the land wasn't flat enough. So pick a nice flat area if you're going to build your base and make that your main area of operations. And this village took absolutely ages to build. In fact, I spent probably about 50 to 100 hours of my 200 hours of playtime to complete the game AFK and just letting the villagers get on with building stuff. You can craft stuff a lot yourself, but it's so much better to just let the villagers do it, especially when you've got a lot of them. And you'll find, as I said, that you just can't craft the highest level stuff yourself anyway. You have to get villagers to do it for you, or you have to be just standing there waiting for the crafting to happen, and it takes absolutely ages to go on. I've sounded really negative in this review, but I actually want to say I've really enjoyed this game. I got sucked right into it. spent a lot of time on it, and I hope that they carry on updating it in the future with more things of interest. It'd be nice to see some changes to the combat that made it easier to sort of stealth kill some of the baddies rather than having to take them all on at once, or maybe improve the armor so it actually feels like you're a bit more invincible, or at least can resist fighting a bit more, or make it so that bots can fast travel, which they can't do at the moment, so they can't use the fast travel points. There's also other things like there's no steeds in the game, there's no horses or anything like that yet, so you have to do a lot of walking, or you have to build a lot of fast travel points to get around, but it's really fun. Playing with friends is pretty easy. I haven't had any bugs or problems with that for the most part, although one of my friends has to keep reload the game every time he dies. But generally speaking, it's been pretty easy to get a game with friends, even internationally, without any problems. The problem is it's locally hosted, it's not in the cloud. And so if you're playing and your friends aren't, you're leveling up your strength and your other attributes, and theirs aren't. And then obviously they've got to then try and fight high-level enemies with low-level attributes. So unless you're all playing at the same time, that becomes a problem. And they can't help work on your world if your computer's not running the game. So there are some downsides to it. But the fact that you can play co-op makes it really appealing, and it is a lot of fun to play with friends, more so than playing on your own. In the end, I'd highly recommend Bellwright to anybody that likes survival games, especially if you like the sort of medieval setting and you like having a lot of fun in a variety of ways with some pretty intelligent gameplay mechanics. It's been great, and hopefully it continues to be great in future. If you found this video useful, check out the links in the description to the playlist with tips and tricks which will give you more insights into the game as well.